on this computer.
And I don't see oh, there it is. It says, got it.
All right. I am here with Charlie Trezevant, the stretch guy, our stretch coach here at Gracie Tampa South, my martial arts gym. This guy is the best kept secret that we've had for a while now, since 2017. How's it going, brother?
It's going great, Matt.
Awesome.
We've kept the secret on purpose.
This is true. Yeah. So Charlie, tell me, how old are you right now?
64.
He's 64 years old. And can you do a split every which way? Are you I'll just tell you.
All 6 splits, full rotation in the hip. I mean, Cirque du Soleil brought me in for a reason.
Yeah. Okay.
You know?
So this is the most flexible guy I know. And like I said, he's 64 years old, which you would think, as you get a little older, you get a little less flexible, but I'm sure he's gotten more as he's gotten older. And
I have. It's true.
Yeah. So he's going to share with us some of his details, his knowledge on flexibility for life, flexibility for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and we'll get into some other stuff as well. So guys, get ready. First, let's talk about, how did you get into stretching and the martial arts world, and where did that begin?
The martial arts, I was 7 years old. I saw it on the side of the road. It was Professor Ed Maley, Florida School of Judo. I said, I want to go see what that is. I had probably seen a couple little martial art films as a kid. I walked into the room. I'm like, this is where I belong. I had done other sports. I played baseball and football and all the stuff you do when you're little, but I really was attracted to the world of martial arts. I think in part because it was you standing there deciding to be there, and it was fail or succeed on your own without the coach deciding to put you in, or the team flopping or not flopping. And I appreciated the personal challenge. That's kind of where I was with that. Then later, as I got into the 5 or so years, I decided to change what I was doing because I didn't have an answer for the kick and the punch. And I decided to start going after some of that. And 2 things collided. One was a list of personal injuries. I have an extra vertebra at the bottom of my spine, doesn't help me. I have 2 blown discs that I messed up really bad coming out of a tree and landed on a fence on my back. Of course, I did what any little boy would do, which is, of course, not tell my parents because I thought I'd get in trouble. So I had to have all the difficulty with that, light scoliosis, and then I ended up with some arthritis, I think also as a byproduct to the fall. From there, I was involved in the martial arts. I wasn't doing a lot of kicking, and all of a sudden I decided to change what I was going after to have an answer for what do you do when the guy kicks and punches. And as I did that, I got destroyed because my range of motion was horrible. I'm the person they used to drag out and say, try to touch your toes, and I could almost get my hands to my knees. Everybody kind of laughed. We all thought it was funny. I thought it was normal because the doctors were explaining to me, well, that's just how you are. And then when I got into the kick and punch side, and I got instantly destroyed because my leg didn't go up really much higher than say the crotch of your pants when I'd kick. And the guy told me, you're going to have to do something bad. And he showed me a little bit about stretching, just like you got to stretch this, you got to stretch that. And I started to work on it. And the more I worked on it, the less my back would hurt me. And then my leg would start to do some stuff. And I had a doctor that was helping me through my back. And he said, Charlie, goes, 2 things. If it ever hurts a lot, or if it ever doesn't hurt at all, come back to my office. And it started to not hurt. And I made an appointment with the office because it's like, well, is there something bad going on here? And he ran me through a series of tests, and he's like, I think you're just starting to move in a way where you're not torturing the back that's got a list of problems in it that, when you overuse a space that has problems, it gets sore. And I said, well, tell me more about that. And he's like, I don't have anything. I got nothing. And back in the day, nobody stretched.
What year are we talking here? What years was this? I'm
probably about 17 years old at that time. And, at 17, they would tell you, and this is, so I'm born in 58, add 17 to that, but they would be telling you whatever range of motion you have, that's it. And you're a guy, you're over 6 feet tall. That's it. It's never getting any better than that. That's it. They'd give you pain medicine. They gave me some kind of a yellow stop sign shaped pill. They gave me a back brace that I was supposed to wear all the time. I was living in misery with that. But as I started to stretch and the pressure started to get out of my back because I wasn't having to use it to do, regular things that people try to do. The next thing I know, now I'm at the doctor's office. He's checking me out. He freaks out because my legs, his sentence, are starting to move like an arm. And it's funny when I hear that sentence in my head, because on the jujitsu side, it's a sport of four arms. Yeah. And, go back in time. And I asked him, I said, is that a problem? He's like, I don't know. And I'm like, oh, so, I went carefully forward, researching everything I could, which back in the day meant going to the libraries. And I spent a ton of time in university libraries, basically photographing and running on copy machines every single image I could get of people doing flexibility work. If it was a book with images in it, I'd purchase it. So I had the 900 postures of yoga. I had the, Bob Anderson back in the day book, and I cut them all out. And I started to look for common threads, and I started to look for things were maybe outside of, what everybody else is looking at. I started to talk to a lot of people about it, got a ton of misinformation back in the day. A lot of that stuff is still floating around and people are still teaching it. And then I started to actually spend time with scientists at universities. And they're like, what, are you in the university? I'm like, no, but I got to talk to you. And they're like, what do you want to talk about? I said, I want to talk about, and I explained to them that I was trying to figure out what should and shouldn't be involved when you do certain stretches. And this one science guy, he said, come with me. He took me to the lab. He said, there's a couple different kind of skeletons. He said, there's the kind that are anatomically correct. These are in science labs. And then there's the ones that are not. And he said, you need to see this kind of a skeleton. And he took me head to toe through that skeleton. And we looked at all the different joints in the body. We looked at the way that they move. He explained to me how you don't want to put certain kind of pressures on them. So I had that in my head. Then I had the list of the stretches. And I started to see how the stretches would come together as a position and where does the pressure go. And today, if you look at yoga, where they have what they'll call the pigeon or whatever it is, but the knees kind of coming around to the front. You're trying to turn the hip and get into the position. They've actually modified it where they'll let the thigh come off the ground and all this kind of stuff so that the torso is now flat to the ground. But when you stretch with me and people stretch with me, I'm always like, no, you got to keep it where you're just going to move from the thigh at the pelvis. Don't let the pressure go down into the knee. And then we also have that very specific modification that we have and we use and I teach, which I came up with to protect the knee joint because the knee joint is weaker than thigh to pelvis. So then we start to make those kind of tweaks, but I've been making tweaks like that and following it out all the way back to when I was 17. I had the big gyms, Bally's, American Fitness, American Health. I taught a program inside of all of those buildings, and I had hundreds and hundreds of students on a weekly basis, 86 to whatever the youngest they'd let in the room. I'd have NFL, NBA, and Olympic athletes with a guy that's 86 and maybe 90 other people in the same room, all working on head to toe and being able to sit back and watch it from a teaching position and say, okay, this guy is flexible this way, why? And then these questions were going through my mind. And then you add in that I had at the age of 20, I'm about 20, I'm up in Rochester, and I was sucked into a place called American Health, which is older than American Fitness. And they basically asked me to quit going to college and go to work for them to run a program for flexibility work. And they gave me a kinesiologist. I have 8 hours of access to this guy that's his specialty. And we started to really go back to the list of the images that I had, filter through the list and come up with goods and bads in the list, come up with how many is too many reps here and what's too much pressure there and how far should you really. So all of these little questions and answers I had one of the most fabulous labs to study this work on the planet. And, I'd watch people basically come in with problems. People I worked with Asperger's, cerebral palsy, all kind of injuries that would be in the room. A guy that was missing half his leg and he's trying to figure out how to stretch and just do, all kinds of stuff, foot injuries. So I got to see him go through the medical side, and I got to play with the range of motion side with him. And it really gave me an opportunity of understanding that is, I just have to say it's unique.
See, that reminds me a lot of Elio Gracie, the story of jujitsu. If anybody knows jujitsu watching this, they know the story how Elio would watch, them do jujitsu, the Japanese form of jujitsu, and just study it and study it. And in his head was like, well, I don't think this would really work. These would definitely work. Let me innovate and add more things to it to make it even better. And that's how we got Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So it's kind of what you did as a kid, a 17-year-old, looking at all this stuff and researching, and all right, this would work, this wouldn't work, this will work for this type of athlete. And one thing I love about you is when you can go into a room full of football players or jiu-jitsu guys or whatever, and you can make what you do work for what they do. And it's just incredible.
Well, and to what you're talking about, Helio and that whole crew, the study of what actually is going to work. How many times did we watch Hoist go into the ring, and I'd watch a guy, they're like, oh, they're blah, 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 there's a Taekwondo guy. And I'm like, okay, I've been doing Taekwondo a long time. And said, he's going to get destroyed. And my friend would look at me and he'd say, why? I said, because I'm looking at his posture and his stance. He's trying to prove that Taekwondo works. He's not trying to win the fight.
Right.
Hoist is in there to win the fight. And my friend would look at me and they're like, but why do you think that? I said, because he thinks that he's got to hold some kind of pride card for his art. He's forgetting he's in a fight. And then I'd watch Hoist destroy that guy. And then there's another guy. I'd watch him destroy that guy. And they're like, but what do you see? I said, they don't know how to protect against a rear naked choke. And they don't know what to do. In the same way when we saw, who was the girl? She's now a wrestler.
Ronda Rousey.
She got destroyed by a boxer. Why is she standing up with a boxer?
Right.
She didn't even go to her best thing.
Right.
And conversations you and I've had, jiu-jitsu is a craft, which means it's a living art. You can refine it. If you find something or somebody finds something better, they can come back to the group and go, hey, we got to study this. On the flexibility work, I looked at it, and I still look at it as a craft. I've had where people doing rehab and doing therapy have brought their students or patients, whatever it is, to me. And it's like, Charles, you have a different way that you go through this part of the body. I'm like, yeah. And they go, show them that. And later I'll have a conversation on, well, don't you have a list? I go, but that's not in my list, so I can't do it. And then it's the thing they need to give them the leverage so that they can grow the range of motion in the space. A lot of people, when they stretch, think that they're just stretching, and whatever it is, you just pull on it and then it works. And that's not the way it is. That's like having a bunch of letters or a bunch of musical notes and thinking that you can write something or play a song. You got to know how to put the pieces together to get the effect you want. You should stretch for a reason.
Yeah, that brings me to my next thing. So let's just say you're a guy, 35 years old. Maybe he does jujitsu, maybe he doesn't, but he wants to get more flexible. He's all stiff. He can barely even reach for a glass. What common mistakes do you see people making when they are trying to stretch and get flexible?
They go from where they're coming from, which led them to a place where they don't have what they want, trying to get to a place where they want to go and have what they want to use as they go into that place. How many times I've had people go, oh, I know how to stretch. I did that when I was in football. I said, oh, but were you stretching for football or were you stretching to stretch? And they usually kind of stare at me for a while. And then I go, were you stretching to be a better punter, a better kicker? Were you stretching to be a lineman? Were you stretching to be a receiver or a passer? Your stretching was for what? And they're like, what are you talking about? I just stretch. And it's not specific enough to address what they're trying to go for. And it's usually not specific enough to address the problems that they're bringing into the situation. Also, a lot of people have the wrong concept in their head of what stretching really is. Everybody sees people when they're little. Matt, you got a couple fabulous kids. I got two. And we watch them grow. And they're 20 something inches when they're born. They're going to get 60, 70 something inches. They're going to go 3 times almost their born height, which means 300%. You're 6 foot and a little bit, you'd be 18 feet tall. Think of the stretch your body would do for you to be 18 feet tall. As a kid, the only time people have a problem is when they grow too fast, stretching pains. Adults, they think that if they're not making it hurt, oh, then I'm not working hard enough. Go back to the guy. He's got to learn how to stretch so that he's not creating body problems. He has to learn how to stretch to represent the joint movements and the needs of the sport so that he can get his body to match up with the patterns of what the techniques are going to call for. Go back in time, Tony Dees, 1992. I might even be before you. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a little after you. But the Olympics, Tony Dees, and 110 high hurdle. He ended up with a silver medal. Great job with what he did. But when I watched him run, he would lean a little bit for every time he'd take his leg over the top of the hurdle. And I got with him. I said, Tony, I'm here to watch you move today. When you go over the hurdle, do you want your body to kind of keep leaning to the side, or do you want to go straight forward and move the leg over the hurdle? He goes, oh, number 2, I want number 2. He goes, how do we get that? So we looked at his range of motion, dialed in the stretches that would provide that for yourself, and go to Kevin Gallagher, go to Maria, go to any of them that have stayed with it. You have at times like, I want my body to be able to do, and then we go to the stretches and add them in like a spice to make sure that we start to work on that. But the other thing we do is we work on moving the space. A lot of people, when they think about stretching, they just think about pulling on it. You need to get it to move, and then you need to move it so that you can start to cement control of that range of motion in that area.
Awesome. So don't stretch too hard. Nice
No.
and soft.
No.
Or it'll mess you up even more. Like, you can get an injury.
It's a fabric. You got the fascia over the muscle, you got the nerves, you got all the connective tissue. When you're little, nobody grows at a rate where you say, oh, my kid, he really just kind of came apart, it tore out his hamstring. You never hear that sentence.
Slow and steady. And you also never hear, my kid looks like a puddle of flesh. I hope his bones grow in sometime. Yeah. And you're trying to, as you're little, move around and go after the range of motion. And then when you're older, you need to remember, and this is important, you're made up of the same stuff that you were made up of when you were little. So that same kind of thing that you did when you were little, which is put little soft constant pressure on the areas, touching the bases, is going to open it up without it really being a problem. Also, we should point out here that the skeleton is going to be the opportunity and the limit of what is your range of motion. You can't move the joint, say, outside of the joint. You can't move the limbs outside of the operation of the joint. And you don't want to try to challenge the joint, because if you mess up the joint, that's going to be a big problem. And you were saying also stretch and then move, stretch and
move.
Oh,
absolutely.
Not just stretch.
My favorite is a light warm up, get into the stretches, do your moving mechanics. For you guys, a flow roll would be a great way to just start to work on that before you get into a class where they may or may not be mirroring what you kind of worked on in your stretch. I think it's also important to go to the instructor and say, what are we going to work on today? And if he says, hey, we're going to go after this, and you have some limits in the range of motion for that training, then you would do stretching to match your moment to that opportunity of what you're being taught.
I like it. So when I met Charlie, it was around 2017, and I was experiencing a couple things. Number one, I had the first real, I probably had herniated disc for a long time, but I was finally starting to experience real pain and sciatic nerve pain from it that kind of just put me right out. And I was trying a lot of different things, massage. I tried with the needles in the back. For, you know what I'm talking about?
Yoga,
When they put
acupuncture.
acupuncture, uh, chiropractics, nothing was really working. And that's about the time I met Charlie. And I also had some shoulder stuff going on from training. And, I just started, like he said, slow and steady. I just started stretching with him, and he'd obviously give me some extra attention and some extra time here and there. We were doing like an hour a day, almost every day.
For a
And
period of weeks.
for weeks, yeah, for a long
And
time. Yeah.
and go to what you're talking about right there. You had the machine that was Matt Arroyo, and you had the technique list that Matt Arroyo would want to use when you do the jujitsu, and the spaces were short and damaged where you couldn't move without tagging into that area that had problems.
It was
So
terrible.
why are you thinking that it would change unless you change? And what did we find? For every single spot that there was an issue, we found shortness in spaces that would cause you to drive into using those spaces in a way that was improper for what you wanted to achieve.
That's it.
You get somebody on their back, and the leg needs to come back, and it needs to turn, and all of this stuff at the pelvis. If it's not doing it, people try to make up for that with their spine.
Exactly.
And the spine is not meant to be overused in the way that most people try to take advantage of it.
So let's say there was somebody like me, even if they don't do jujitsu and you're watching this, and they have that lower back pain, that sciatic nerve pain, and it's just, man, it gets into their everyday life, everything they try to do. For me, I couldn't stand up for more than like 40 seconds without the burn. So
Yeah.
what would you have them do? How would you have them start? Where would they even get started with the stretch routine? And what would you have them do to help alleviate the back pain, lower back pain specifically?
First thing, a couple things I would do. One is I would really get an assessment on what is and is not moving well at the different points on the body. And I've been teaching now for 44 years. I can say almost universally, the people that have problems in the back have limits from the pelvis at the leg. Then what happens is they start to overuse the back, and then you end up with problems now that are real problems in the back, that then when they try to do something again, limit the leg to the pelvis, and they go into overuse in the low spine. When I was brought in to work with the crew from Cirque du Soleil, Crystal, when they were in town at Amalie Arena, and I was invited to go to the show, and then I actually stretched with the people from Cirque du Soleil on the ice in Amalie after the show for close to 2 hours. I asked them, I said, what's the biggest issue that you guys deal with? And they're all like, it's my low back, it's my low back, it's my low back. When we'd go through the stretching, almost all of them that had that sort of a comment also had a limit at that ball and socket from where that thigh bone goes into the pelvis. And I'd look at them like, and then when you go to make up for what you don't have there, they go, I go to my low back. Then you go through the gym, take our one friend that's a 3-time world champion, and he used to have, I think you'd agree with me, complaints about everything on his body hurting him all the time.
Everything.
And now, I mean, does he complain about really anything in the list?
No, he's not as he's in his mid-40s, and he's competing still. He's doing really well. So,
and then take, yourself as an individual, and as we would open the space up so you could move it so the secondary space didn't have to be involved, then you're not bothering that space. That space has a better opportunity to shrink back down to get the support around it and get strong, and you're getting the work now from the other area. But lots of pieces to that puzzle. Lots of pieces. You need the range of motion, you need the control and the strength to handle that space without it causing a problem of overuse, overextension. A lot of people, when they stretch, they actually will bother the knee instead of keeping the knee healthy. And they're trying to move the thigh at the pelvis, because the leg will be straight and thigh to pelvis is going to be stronger than the knee. And if you ever look at them, sometimes you'll see where that knee will want to almost look like it's going to go backwards when they go to straighten that leg out, instead of setting up to get the hamstring to stretch and let me leave that knee alone. There's lots of pieces of that puzzle.
All right, so now let's go to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guy, because the majority of people watching this train Jiu-Jitsu.
Right.
So I know for me personally, lower back, like we just spoke about, is a big issue. Knee injuries for Jiu-Jitsu have to be the number one injury, whether that be from someone not tapping to a heel hook or a toe hold.
Yeah.
A really popular one is someone lying on their back and their knees are to their chest, and then somebody taking the foot and bringing it to their head, and they don't have the flexibility in their butt and their hamstrings.
Correct.
So then their knee blows out. I've seen that happen at my own gym a million times.
Right.
When it doesn't move, it can't move, it pops. So
well, and if you're using your hand to move that leg, you're already confessing that the leg doesn't have the kind of control that you want it to have.
Right.
And you have free use of about 65% of a stretched out space, meaning if a person can do a little overextension, which means it goes a little bit further than flat on a split, and then they can kind of start to work at moving their feet up a little bit. Okay, they can go to flat at any day. I can drop straight into a split, do a roll through left or right, like you'd move the fingers on your hands, and it feels like butter. It's very, very strong because I have the strength in the space to control it, and I've had the time to put that together. But you take what you're talking about, where they're not stretching from the thigh to the pelvis, and that knee, when a lot of people stretch, especially in some of the stuff that they'll show in, I'll just say some of the other activities people get involved in, then they end up loosening the knee joint. So they're setting the knee up to be weak, and they're allowing the thigh to pelvis to be tight. And then when they go to pull that foot around, they're basically blowing their own knee out. They're not able to just roll that in and then hook it in. Some of the best that I've ever seen in the movements, Robbie's got great movement in that. Dan Martinez had a great mechanic in that. And they are almost what I would describe as spider-like, meaning they are very quick onto what it is because they have the movement, they have the strength, they have the control, they have the understanding in their mind. Maria has really changed the way that, she'll work with the movements like that. And over time, the goal is to open yourself up, make yourself stronger in spaces you didn't used to be able to move, and understand that mechanic and how to apply it to the art of jiu-jitsu. One of my favorite things, Matt, with the jiu-jitsu practitioners that I get to be around is watching you guys get physically more able to do stuff on a regular basis, because anybody that competes against you that's looking at old film is not seeing what they're going to run into. They're going to see the person you used to be and the limit, and then think to that limit. We work with some of the kickers that are your UFC guys on specific things so that their legs are able to do stuff now that they couldn't do back in the day. So anybody studying film on them is looking at the wrong picture. And in the jiu-jitsu world, I'd also like to mention this: hands. One of the greatest jiu-jitsu practitioners that I've ever had a chance to be around missed a shot at the ADCC because one finger was not where he wanted it to be. He's put it back together since then, but the guy that went that year, I think that guy got the silver. I would have wanted to see him fight to the death right there in the middle. But hands are really important, and some people can't really close those fingers down. They'll get more to here, and then they'll roll this over, and then they'll exhaust the hand because space in the hand that they can't access for a grip. And the grip, I think, is one of the primary things that you guys have to have in the jiu-jitsu.
So if I'm going to jiu-jitsu class, should I stretch before or after?
Absolutely.
Or both?
Absolutely. Yeah, the answer to that is yes. I would either show up early, warm up a bit, and stretch out really good. And when I say that, I'm talking about a lot of things. One is you got to stretch the stuff you need to stretch. You got to stretch the stuff that you need to chase so you can be better when you're practicing the jiu-jitsu. You need to open your body up to be able to train on that day. I used to, when I would get ready to go to a martial art class, I had a favorite TV show that I would watch back in the day, Kung Fu with David Carradine, is, you know, the classic. And I would watch that and I'd make a deal with myself, which is, while the show's on, I'm stretching. No repeat of technique. Commercial, I get up and get a sip of water. Show's on for the second period, I'm stretching. Then that time from where I lived to where I would train, about 15 minutes in the car, guess what? My body had a chance to kind of settle down a little bit because I wouldn't want to go in rubbery. Then I'd go into some of my mechanics, make sure they feel right. Anything that I need to make an adjustment on, I would. Boom, I'm in class. But that get ready is a big, giant part of training jujitsu. How many times do we hear people talk about their diet? They talk about their cardio. They talk about what they're doing for strength. They talk about mental toughness. I got to tell you, simplest terms, if you can't move it, you can't use it. And if you can't move it, you can't make it strong. And then sometimes people go, well, but see, I don't do that. That guy does. I don't do that. Guy does it. If you don't have an opportunity to even see if it would be good for your game, what are you doing? You know, jujitsu, it's a craft. It's a living art. You know, you have the things you're good at. How do you make that grow? You got to extend out your opportunity for technique. Sometimes the base of that is providing yourself the range of motion to do the thing that you're looking at. You know, we see a lot of people do very tricky artistic stuff nowadays. Some of it's almost a little too artsy, but certain people can pull it off. But if you try it and you don't have the range of motion for it, it's not going to happen. And again, you risk injury.
Yeah, it reminds me, I was just interviewing Hoist Gracie a couple weeks ago, and I said, what's most important for jiu-jitsu and everything? He said, number one is technique, because if you know the right techniques, it doesn't matter how strong or flexible you are. And then the second thing was flexibility. So right behind technique was flexibility, and then strength and endurance was last.
And when we had the opportunity, and thank you very much, it was a great honor to be there, to share a meal with Hoist. And we were talking with him. I think that you and I were standing right there. And he said, you know, I stretch about 20, 30 minutes every day.
Every day.
And, you know, it's not just before I go to class and teach. This is part of my jujitsu lifestyle.
Yep.
And, you know, for me, I just kind of sat there because there's nothing else that I needed to say. But when what is technically one of the best on the planet and understands it at a level that he does and has coached the kind of people that he has, you know, if it's important to him and it's important to his jujitsu, what else is there to say about that?
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
And, you know, stretching, not everything that people do is stretching. You know, dance uses range of motion, but it's not stretching. Yoga, it's a postural art. And I have friends that are big time yoga people. I've got a lot of respect for that community, but yoga does not match up to jujitsu. There is what you need as a basic list of, I need these techniques, these movements match my craft, they match my art. Well, you got to get a command of that. And then anything that's an extra thing, that's the fluff that's on top. You add it in as you can and you have time.
And I think the secret, if it's even a secret, and correct me if I'm wrong, to living into your later years, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, is flexibility to live pain-free. I mean, how much pain? You said you had discs that were bursting.
Zero.
And all that.
Yeah, I live with zero pain.
And
I'm not taking meds for it. I'm living at basically a zero pain level because I'm not challenging the joints in a way where I'm making them sore, but I have the range of motion to use the joints and the spaces in a proper way where it's as easy as moving my fingers. This morning, I'm working with a gentleman, great guy. He's 92 years old. His range of motion is really good, way ahead of where he started. right now I'll do this with you. And I think we're in what, our 5th or 6th year we're going into
Yeah.
on the jujitsu side. And then later today, I'll be with a very high level professional athlete. I'll start with him at 6:30, and I'll do a whole bunch of stuff with him specific to what he does. But, you know, you got to go after the meat and potato list because you don't want to leave stuff out there hanging, but you got to address the stuff that is about what you're trying to do in your sport or your art.
Yeah, and you hear it all the time. Oh, I can't do that. I'm too old. I'm too old. It's like, okay, well, if you stay
No.
flexible and you stay,
Yeah.
you know, you got to be flexible to be strong. And you know, I was just watching like the other guy. I saw that he's not as flexible as you, but he's pretty freaking flexible as Hoist Gracie. And I just
Yeah.
today I was scrolling down his Instagram, and he's freaking out there on a surfboard holding onto a a rope on a boat, and he's just
Right.
going. And I'm like, this
Right.
guy's 55 years old.
Right.
He doesn't have any pain. He's good. He's good to go. He keeps
Right.
and he said he stretches every night when he's watching TV at night. He's stretching. It's
Yeah.
there's
You
something
know,
to it.
I
You
mean,
know.
2 days ago, I pulled a unicycle out. I'm still riding around and playing on stuff like that. But
Exactly.
it's a balance thing. You
Right.
lose your range of motion, you lose that opportunity for the suppleness, which helps you with the balance. You know, tomorrow I will be Wednesday. I'll be with the girls that I work with, the guys I work with in the dance world, which is ballet, tap, jazz, all that kind of stuff. And I have a range of motion that they're still trying to chase and get a hold of.
That's insane.
It's one of those kind of things where, you know, that full roll through that you see me go from one side to the other. And they're like, but how do you get that? How do you get that? And one of my favorite things is to help out the person. They could be on a jujitsu floor. They could be in a dance academy, wherever it is. They could be the older guy that always wanted to do it. And he's new. And I'll meet him at your desk. He's like, you know, but do you think I'll be able to do this? And I'll ask him really simple. I said, you're a smart guy? They're like, oh, yeah, I'm a smart guy. I said, okay. Then the answer is yes. They're like, how do you give me that answer so simply? I said, because I'm going to give you a thing called range of motion. And you're going to be training with Matt Arroyo and that crew, which is some of the finest instruction I've ever seen. I'm not saying that to be nice in a martial arts building. And I have seen in the land of the greats, I've had an opportunity to be, I've seen it. You guys are about technique, doing it the right way, and helping your students grow. The guy that I'll meet that way is like, but you know, I'm having trouble. It's like, okay, but let me show you this. Let me show you that. I always hear the same thing. A couple of months goes by, you know, my body's starting to move like I want, you know, and they just fill in the blanks. I'll see them in the course of a year. Hey, let me show you where I am now from where I started. And I was like, and when you roll, they're like, oh, I can do stuff I never thought I'd be able to do. But
It's true.
your school, you, a couple other people in that daisy chain, all the way to, I'll say, one of the greatest men ever in the world that I've had a chance to be around is Rob Kahn. I've had very few moments with Rob Kahn, but Rob Kahn is all about what's good for the people that train in my space. And there was a couple people that explained what I do to him. And he and I had, I think, one of the most special conversations I've ever had with an individual. And he said, boom, I'm happy for you to be in the building. And that meant the world to me. And for the people that are his people, anytime I can help them, I'm always very happy to do that. You know, I want your guys to do well. I want them to destroy when they go to competitions. And if somebody goes, hey, I'm like, come here right now. I don't even care if they're a student of mine. You know, if they're in your building, they're one, you know, let's fix that.
That's awesome. And yeah, and you'll see if you guys start stretching consistently and doing it the right way, not trying to break yourself, but just slow and just like anything else, slow and steady.
Let it grow.
Let it grow. And
let it grow.
You'll start to see what I noticed was when I was doing jujitsu, I was able to do things that I normally had really struggled to do, like flexibility, throwing my leg over to stop a guard pass, or, you know, someone either ranking my arm on something. I'm like, oh, I can go a little further if I needed to get more time for the escape. You know, little things like that. I didn't jump right into a split or anything like that, but more importantly, for my art, I was able to do things I wasn't able to do. And even when I was in the shower, I remember scratching, you know, washing my back. I'm like, whoa, I can go a little further. I can I could lift a little higher. I could use my leg to open doors, like just weird, crazy, cool things that you never thought you'd be able to do, and you're able to do. And I don't think it matters what age, as long as you just get at it.
And Matt, how many times have I caught you and I said, so you started lifting or you started doing these, and you're like, yeah, how do you tell? I'm like, well, I'm seeing it in the way that you move right now.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, let's not let that space go short while you're working at putting the strength in it. And you can be phenomenally strong and flexible at the same time. And, you know, for most of the people that are trying to lift to gain strength, and yeah, I'm a fan of that. You're doing it the right way. I've got no issue there. But you got to make sure that your body can actually get in the posture so that the lift is correct. The people that I see that have issues when they lift, a lot of them are lifting with poor technique. And a lot of times that's because they don't have the range of motion to do it the right way. The old thing of putting the board under the heel, because you can't do, you know, and then it's like, well, do that without the board there. Like, oh, I can't do it without the board. I said, but do you walk around with the board? It's, oh, no, I don't walk. I said, then what are you training to do? And you're taking yourself out of square.
Right.
You know, you don't want to do that.
Well, that's freaking awesome, man. How can anyone follow you? Do you have an Instagram or a Facebook, or do you?
I have posted on Facebook under Stretch Guy Charlie, STRTCHGUYCHARLIE, no capitals and no spaces. And I did put a bunch of what I'll call video shorts in that location. And it's clickable, it's usable, you can share it. There's no fees for it. And I put it out there that so people would have a good start point. Also, Matt, you and I put together a video a while back that you did a great edit on, that I think that if I was doing jujitsu, it may be one of the first things that I would look at, and I would go through that and then go back to my Facebook. There's a couple of videos, Functional Flexibility with Charlie Trezevant and Secrets of the 7 Splits with Charlie Trezevant. Those two videos combined with, here's the stuff that you and I put together that's jujitsu and stretching. And, you know, you've seen in 5 years, almost 6 years, the people that are working with it on a regular basis, what's happened to their range of motion, Matt?
Like crazy, man. It just increases. Crazy. Yeah.
Crazy. And these aren't young people. You know, these are 40 and so year old people, 40. And 40 it's plus. The people that have actually gained the most in range of motion are the older people compared even to the kids. But what's the difference? They went after it. You know, you can't go after it the right way and not have it work. You can't train at Matt Arroyo's school or train with Hoyce or train with Rob Kahn and train with Kevin Gallagher, train with, you know, whoever, fill in the name, part of your work, and learn it the wrong way, because you're not going to teach it the wrong way. And when the match happens, they're going to apply what works. You know, I look at the stretching as the same kind of thing. It's a study over time of what works. And then let's apply that, and don't be shy about what's right in front of you. That's the truth.
Yeah. And I think if you're a young guy watching this, maybe 18, 19, or even in your 20s or early 30s, don't miss this. Because if you start now, then by the time you are 40 plus and you're training and all that, you'll be good to go. You'll be, you know what I mean? You'll already have a habit. If you're thinking, you know, I'm 25 and I'm unstoppable and I'm invincible, which is of course what most 25-year-olds feel and think, you know, you might miss the boat here. And then when you will be 40 one day or 50 one day, and you will still want to train. And now you got to start at that age, which is fine. But just imagine if you just got in on it right now and just did a little bit each day.
Well, there's a guy I met at your school recently who I think, from what he's telling me, and I don't know who he is, but he is a high level competitor. I think he was saying that he was going after the U.S. Olympic team if they had jiu-jitsu in the Olympics. And I said, you know, how's your range of motion? Because for me, you know, you can learn something if you have the range of motion. You can, you know, you can make it slow. All that. He goes, oh, my range of motion is just, it's the bomb. It's excellent. You know, I'm like, well, let me see, show me. And his range of motion, I'd say, is about a 50% range of motion. Now, it's probably perfect for what he's currently doing. But if you get hurt, do you get to keep the range of motion or do you lose some? the general tendency is you lose it. And if you don't know how to get it back, and he's like, so what do you think? Pretty good, huh? I said, well, I'd put you at a C. And he's looking at me like he's in shock. I said, look, let me show you. He's like, and I show him the same thing he was trying to do, but with a fuller movement on it. And I said, the difference is you get maxed out at this angle right here. I'm still strong there, and I'm still strong going forward if I need more movement or more range of motion in the space. You don't have anything, and they start to put your joint at a place of being tortured.
Yeah.
You know, I watched Kevin Gallagher. What's this thing right here, Matt, where they're all wrapped up around
head arm triangle, head and arm triangle.
Yeah. And this is ADCC, and an absolute beast had him. And I'm close watching this because I'm right there at the ringside. And I watched Kevin manage to, you know, put up with what the guy was trying to do and get out of what that was. And I asked him later, I said, you know, for most people, he goes, for most people, that would have finished them right there. You know, the what that would have been for pain. He goes, yeah. He goes, but I had the range of motion to where he thought he had me, but I was able to put up with whatever it was and then escape it. And I think for a lot of you guys, when somebody looks at jiu-jitsu or competition from, this is what I normally run into, and then they run into somebody that's extended the range of motion, extended their strength opportunities through the joint, and then you have more to bring to that moment, I think it makes you a more dangerous animal. You know, the young guys, they don't always get it. There's some sort of moment where the light bulb will go off. For a lot of people, it has to do with when they got hurt. Billy Q.
Injury.
Billy Q. You know, and you and I had the conversation, and I said, you know, Matt, and you said, Charlie, if you can help him, help him. And I said, you know what? We're just going to take care of that guy because, you know, he deserved people to help him. And that's exactly what we did. And, you know, I watched him work at really keeping the knee movement on the right line, getting rid of bad technique, which might have continued to torture it. And, you know, he's done great for that. Fight of the night, right? A UFC fight of the night. You know, didn't he get one of those?
Oh, he did. Fight of the night.
Yeah.
Awesome, dude. Well, if you wanted the course that he was talking about for the BJJ guys, it's you can get it at www.flexibilityforbjj, like FOR.com. Flexibilityforbjj.com, or you can go to thejujitsulifestyle.com and it's in the store there as well. I would definitely get on that if you train jiu-jitsu and if you want to train jiu-jitsu until you're old, as I do and most others.
And that's the other thing is, you know, how many times have you seen people, my body is just too beat up? You know, let's go to where you are 5 years ago. And I know you had to have in your mind, I think we've talked about this, questions about whether or not you're going to be able to continue with what it was that you love to do. And when's the last time you had an injury?
I don't want to jinx it.
No, but listen, I am not saying this solves all problems.
Right.
But you've had the range of motion that you needed for what it is that you want to do.
Exactly.
And even when it was something like your finger, you know, you managed to put that guy back like it needed to be. You know, and that was a neck, shoulder, back, and leg thing. That's a pretty good combo.
Yeah, I feel great. I'll be 40 in a couple weeks. I train 4 days
I heard the rumor.
I heard the rumor. I don't mind it. I feel pretty good. And 4 days a week jiu-jitsu, 2 days a week weight training, and I try to stretch as much as I can now. I stretch with you on Friday, I stretch on my own, and it's changed everything. So
and let me talk about one thing here for a moment. One of the things that's different in the way that I approach teaching flexibility work from a lot of what other people will do. I look at the way the person moves and does not move, and then I work to help them understand how to get the leverage that's proper for what they're trying to do and keep the pressure out of spaces that should not be involved. You pit your leg against your low back, and your low back is going to lose. You know, you take one leg against the low back, you know what? We got a better shot at not bothering the back while we're working on the leg. You get all these little off angles that I instruct where you come around to the line that a lot of people try to start at. They can't get there. You need to know how to almost de-evolve the movement and then develop back to the big line that you're trying to get to. It's not about running into something that, oh, golly gee, I would do that, but I can't. It's like, oh, I get that. But how do we get to the line that you're trying to have as the only line that you train on? You know, for me, I can get all stretched out in a matter of seconds. I mean, just flip, flip, flip. I'm ready to go. Let's go. And my range of motion is there. But somebody else maybe kind of baby around a little bit before they're ready to kind of go after the same kind of thing.
That makes sense. Well, that's all I got, brother. I really appreciate you taking the time out today and sharing your knowledge with us. You got 44 years of just awesome stretching and life knowledge that you've shared with us for 5 years. And we're very thankful and grateful.
Matt, one of the things that we should just mention while I'm here, Friday at 10:30.
Yep.
10:30 to 11:30 is when we do the flexibility work for the people that come from the outside or they're part of the school and they're doing that. If you would like to invite anybody that's watching this podcast to the gym where they get to come in and stretch with us on the one time or so they can kind of experience that a little bit and maybe get some help with what they're working on. If they're in the space, I'm happy to have them. If you're happy to have them in the space, then it's good all the way around.
Awesome, dude. Thank you, brother. Appreciate everything.
Thanks, Matt.
All right, my man. Take care.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for sharing.
Thanks, man.